Constitutional Conversations is a series of discussions by America's leading scholars about the principles, framing, ratification, and implementation of constitutional government in the United States. This series is hosted by the James Madison Memorial Fellowship Foundation of Alexandria, Virginia.
I happen to think that James Madison, was, in some way remains our most important, creative, critical political thinker. He was deeply read, very much like Thomas Jefferson and John Adams. These guys were well-versed in modern political writings, the writings of antiquity. They were deeply reflective. They did engage in a wholehearted way with the text they read. But Madison had the unique experience of having been, or let's say the distinctive, I think in his case, almost unique experience of having been directly involved in different experiments in constitution making and constitutional enforcement. And he thought a lot about that, and I think he thought a lot about what was necessary to make a constitutional system work over time. Madison lived. Madison dies in 1836. Unless if you lop Aaron Burr off the list, which is where most of us would want to leave him, he really was the last of the founders, the last of the founding generation. And he lives to see witness the nullification crisis in South Carolina in the early 1830s. He witnesses a number of other controversial debates over the nature of the American Union. I think he was very much concerned about the efforts in political life to simplify or oversimplify the nature of the American political system. He lives long enough to see there's a kind of famous set of debates in South Carolina that pivot on the question, we the people of the preamble, is the national government really formed on a vote of, by the decision of the collective people of the United States, or is it really a union of quasi-sovereign states? And of course, Madison's writings of the Virginia Resolution in 1798 did provide part of the foundation for the idea that there was still a confederation of semi-sovereign states. Madison understood that kind of reasoning, to say that the trumping principle is either we the people on the one hand or we the states on the other, that actually was a very dangerous way to reason about political phenomena. So I think a Madisonian mode of political thinking, there's actually a great text for this if you read Federalist 37, which was the first essay in the second printed volume of the Federalist in 1788, is really Madison's statement of a larger theory. So Madison thought then, and continues to act on the idea that when we talk about political phenomena, when we talk about institutions, when we talk about the division of power between the national government and the states, or the division of power between and among the different departments of government, that political phenomena are not neat, or they're not, to use his language, perfectly accurate, perfectly identifiable in the way that phenomena in nature might be. They are inherently ambiguous. They are inherently kind of soft and kind of polymorphous in their construction. If you want to make the American federal system work, you have to try to describe and understand it in its details. If you just say there's some big principle, we the people authorizes a strongly national government, we the sovereign states seems to point the way towards successive states' rights, those aren't ways to figure out how the system's going to work. Those are really kind of trump cards you're trying to play to kind of overrule the other side by invoking some grand principle. If you want to make the federal system work at a point in our history where it's clear from the 1830s on, or even the 1819 on, that there are serious sources of tension within it, you have to be patient. You have to understand that the truth of federalism really lies in the details of the federal system, not in some big overarching principle or some big overarching claim. If you're committed to the Union, you have to try to understand what really makes the Union work. And you have to reason on that basis. If instead you keep escalating the rhetoric by saying, no, this principle trumps all, that's not a formula for compromise, it's not a formula for agreement, it's not a formula for consensus. It's really potentially, a formula for disaster. Because you'll get strongly attached to one version of the Union or the other, and what you really need to figure out is there is this big, somewhat, hilly, maybe even swampy, whatever, middle ground in between. And you have to try to survey that. You have to identify its landmarks. and then try to respect them. So that's, I think, a Madisonian way of thinking. And of course, the tragedy of Madison's life was that he lives long enough to 1836 to realize that everything he and his colleagues had set out to do in 1787 was potentially in danger.
Constitutional Conversations is made possible by a generous grant from the Fairleigh S. Dickinson Jr. Foundation. Constitutional Conversations is made possible by the James Madison Education Fund.